Today we're going to review the very best legendary artifacts in Call of Dragons. This is based on your being in Season 1+, which is sort of the second season you'll play, but is in many ways sort of a rerun of the first map with some different rules. So stick around in this video for the very best legendary artifacts worth investing in Call of Dragons. Hello my friends and welcome back. I'm Chisgule Gaming, and there are a couple core principles that we need to review before I rank all the legendary artifacts to talk about which ones are actually the very best. And one thing that's very important that you'll notice in your second season of Call of Dragons, technically it's Season 1+ Stars Reignited, is that the level on artifacts goes up. The maximum level on artifacts goes all the way up to 60. You can take it up to even 5 and 6 stars. So you may be wondering, what do the 5th and 6th stars do? The 5th star requires epic emblems from artifacts in order to star it up. You need to basically shed 6 epic artifacts, okay? And that gives you 7.5% less damage taken, which is amazing. And when you get to 6 stars, you need like, I want to say 3 or 4 legendary emblems that you shed in order to get an extra 7.5% damage dealt. Now, you obviously would want 6 stars on every artifact if you could afford it, but most people can't, myself included, which means you're going to have to pick and choose. And not only that, but the percentage boosts that you get here change based again on the skill level of the artifact, but also the sort of generation of the artifact as well. Let me explain that a little bit more in depth. You see, if we look at some of these artifacts, the Sorlin's Blade is available in Season 1. You could consider this sort of like a Generation 1 artifact, okay? And this artifact only goes to a maximum of 5% less damage taken and 5% more damage dealt. I'm mentioning this because, okay, it may not seem like much at first blush, but a grand total, when maxed out, of 5% of goodness, that's 2.5% more damage dealt, and 2.5% less damage taken, is kind of a big deal, especially as a passive benefit. And on the topic of passive benefits, one thing that we have to acknowledge in this video is the reality of lag in big fights. And when you try to fight in a big brawl in this game, the most important brawls you get in are these giant fights, which is really fun. But very frequently, when I find myself in a giant fight, there is crippling lag that makes it so that an artifact with a template does not work. What does that mean? That means that if I wanted to use something like the Phoenix Eye, okay, great artifact, this requires you to set an area of effect template to choose where you're targeting the damage to go. But in a big fight with big lag, you go to use the ability and nothing happens. You try to drop a template, nothing happens. So for that reason, I am going to more heavily weight passive abilities on artifacts because these abilities do not work in big fights. And, you know, we just don't know when that's going to change. And so I consider that to be, you know, a knock against the artifact. It really is. Some are simply better because you actually can use them. And in addition to that, there's one more thing, which is like a consideration before we even get to ranking the artifacts, which is that some of these are deceptively good. Allow me to explain. You see, when you rally something or you attack something that's in, for example, a resource node, targeted effects like the Kingslayer don't hit things in a resource node. Okay, that's a little bit weird because you can target the thing in the resource node, you can put the template over the thing in the resource node, but I'm pretty sure you can't actually hit the thing in the resource node with the template of the Kingslayer, weirdly enough. But some artifacts work in that situation. For example, if I use the Infernal Flame, because all this is doing is making it so I deal extra damage on my normal attacks, well, guess what? This artifact actually works. So some of these artifacts that have sort of passive effects are actually sneaky in how powerful they are. In addition to the fact that, like, okay, there are actually passive buffs that you're gaining from some of these, but also the fact that it buffs your march and there's no targeting template means you don't get wrecked by lag and you don't get wrecked by situations that otherwise most artifacts wouldn't work. Like, you could use Infernal Flame to rally a city. I'm not saying mages are good for it. And I'm pretty sure you can activate this because it doesn't have a template, which is kind of interesting. I'm not entirely sure about city rally activation, so I don't want to be held accountable for that. But certainly for battling something that's in a resource node, that'll work. So with all of that context about these artifacts established, let's go into Tier Maker and do our evaluation. Let's rank them, baby. And I care pretty much exclusively about open field. Rallying and garrisoning in this game is borderline completely irrelevant. That's not entirely true. There will be a few situations, but for that reason, the rally banner that has great passive effects when you rally something and the garrison harp simply don't matter for almost all of your gameplay in Call of Dragons. And it's kind of unfortunate, but the reality is that because artifacts need to go to level 60, you kind of only want to work on the artifacts associated with the heroes you're actually fighting with in the open field, presumably a maximum of 5 of them. For most players, super whales will need more, okay? So that means you really need to focus in a small number of artifacts. So we're going to get to the truth. What are like the best 5 here, okay? I'm going to try to limit the S tier to the best 5. Now, one of the very best artifacts that we've got to just jam in there that's so good has to be the Infernal Flame. And I am really surprised at how good this is. The Infernal Flame at first seemed really weak to me because why would I use the Infernal Flame when I could use instead something like the old Phoenix Eye? Here it is. I'll put Phoenix Eye at A tier. And that seems maybe a little bit crazy, but the thing is that Phoenix Eye only has a maximum of that 5% damage dealt and damage taken reduction. And although the area of effect damage on Phoenix Eye is amazing, it's templated, which means you can get wrecked by this in a big fight. You may not be able to place it at all, which means it's basically worthless. And what's amazing about the Infernal Flame over here is that it's got this passive attack boost when you're scorching stuff, which is really, really good. So even when the ability itself is down, it's doing things for you. For that reason, I think that's got to be probably the best mage artifact in the game. Now, from here, there are several other artifacts for mages we do need to rank. One of them that I'm going to drop all the way down at the C tier and is maybe the D tier is Tears of Arbon. I thought this was going to be really cool. It drops a healing field, which is so badass, but for some reason, healing factor and damage factor just work in completely different ways. And so the amount of healing you ultimately get here is so small compared to the damage you could have dealt. I think this is a really bad invest for an artifact. Also, while we're here on bad investments, obviously, look, I really like the Gathering artifact right over here. This one's pretty cool. Spawns in a resource node. In fact, I'm going to put it as being as useful as the Tears of Arbon. Heck, technically, it's more useful than the Tears of Arbon. I actually use this damn thing for gathering, and it's really good. But there is a Gathering artifact that is actually terrible, and it's this guy over here. It teleports you next to a high-level resource node. Hello. You'd think that's cool, but A, someone else could be walking to that resource node already. B, you need to figure out how many troops you're going to bring to the resource node before you teleport over, so you need to bring probably too many troops. And then C, it could teleport you to a high-level resource node that might actually be mostly drained already anyways. So it could actually have less resources than another node that's lower level, but actually hasn't been drained yet at all. So, dude, that thing is just terrible. Back to the magic artifacts. Boy, there's a bunch of artifacts we can just remove from consideration, which is important. You need to know this, right? Which are the right ones. I feel like this staff, which teleports a bunch of your troops somewhere, is really cool, but I don't think it's God tier, and I certainly wouldn't use it all the time. It's magic, it's interesting, you'd use it periodically. I can't give it a better rating than what I've done there. Similarly, I've got a magic artifact here that I want to rank that hasn't showed up in the game yet, and I'm in Season 1+. And what's weird is that this is like a Season 1 quality item, giving a max of 5% damage taken reduction and 5% damage dealt boost. I'm going to put it in the A tier, okay? And this artifact does a huge defense reduction for like 10 plus targets, and that is really cool. But because it's an area of effect, I think with a template, I can't rank it. I just can't rank that at S tier because in many fights, it will simply be unusable. So I'm going to give it an A. I think it might actually be better than an A, but for the big fights that I find myself getting into, since I can't actually use it, I'm going to drop it at that A tier rather than the S tier. Okay. Now that covers the overwhelming majority of our magic-based artifacts over here. There is technically one other magic artifact that I suppose we could talk about, but I'm going to put it at the C tier as well. This right over here gives you march speed. I guess it's not really a magic artifact, but you might be tempted to put it on your Celestials. And gosh, I don't think I actually was streaming when I got into this fight, but I was using this right over here, okay, Infernal Flame on my mages, and they were using the Springbird Feather, which makes them march faster, right? And I got into a duel with somebody. It was a T5 guy. And, you know, we're slugging it out, and then, boom, I dropped the Infernal Flame on them. They're dead, right? That was it. Their march dropped from, like, you know, we both were at 80%, and then I took them down to 30%. I was like, well, nice knowing you, bro. Nice knowing you, bro. And he used his little feather to get away after he was already dead, right? So the feather is just, like, not actually good. It's, like, cute, and obviously it's fun, and I feel like in certain game modes, like, you know, the 30 versus 30 battleground, it could be so fun, but this list is for your typical slug it out, save your city, save your alliance, the fight that matters to stay alive. That's how we're ranking these artifacts, and so it does not rank. Similarly, bro, I mean, we've got this peacekeeping artifact, so let's just put that in the D category immediately. And we've got this marksman artifact that's kind of curious. I'm going to drop it in the C category, but maybe I'll bump it up to the B category. This marksman artifact's sort of weird, and maybe if you had enough marksmen, it could be kind of interesting. I'm just really uncertain about it. So we're gonna leave it there for now, and maybe we'll re-rank it based on where other stuff goes. Okay? From here, where do we want to go next? I kind of want to talk about cavalry, man. So let's do that. I want to jump this guy up to S tier. So this is the Spring Blades, and I feel like it's really best served on your Emrys. And it's got some passive effects that are really powerful, and everyone who's using it says it's really, really amazing. I'm tempted to put it at S tier, but it is something that does, I think, require a target. And if it requires a target, not a template, I think it could be good. But again, if it requires a template, like, and you can't use it in a big laggy fight, you know, kind of what's the point? The other one that I'm going to jump up there is going to be the Kingslayer. And I have just loved using my Kingslayer. It is so fun. It is so powerful. I mean, the way that I use cavalry, and the way I think most people should use cavalry, is for hit and run. And it is so good for hit and run. The other artifact that's really good, but not as punchy, is the Sorlin's Blade. That gives you march speed instead of attack. I think there's a lot of value to it. I used Sorlin's Blade last season. I loved it. This season, I've got my Kingsguard up to like level 4. So I'm just using that, man. Or Kingslayer. That's what it is. And I'm just shredding people with my Kingslayer, man. It's disgusting. So I'm enjoying the Kingslayer. I'm going to put it up there for now, but I kind of want to only have one item at the S tier for each troop type. So I guess that means I kind of got to bump it down one, and we'll put it over here. I want one for each troop type. I mean, we're going to be brutal here. Really, really brutal. On the topic of being brutal, we've got the Cav teleport item, which I think is cute, but not actually good. This teleports your march to a location of your choosing, and you actually need to have a lot of skill levels on this thing to actually go where you want to go, the storm arrows. I was using this at the lowest level, and I thought I could jump over a river, and then I couldn't, and I got sad-faced, and I was just sad. I was like, wow, the lowest level of this can't even go over a river. You really need more skills on this to actually do cool stuff. And even then, like, bro, I mean, it goes down in this category of, like, that's cute, but not good, in my opinion. And, you know, the same is true of this wolf woman of healer helmet. The way that this works is you teleport into an area, and after the time elapses, it teleports you back. I just find these to be kind of unexciting. I get that you can do cool hit and run, but you know what else does cool hit and run? You pop in with a Kingslayer and freaking wreck people, and then get out. Like, you just go in a resource node to get out. Make your own escape. You can figure it out, okay? So I like those more, and I like them a lot more, and I think that should be the priority. Now, from here, let's talk about archer stuff. Let's freaking go. I feel like there's two archer bows, or two archer items, I guess I should say, that are just really crazy. One is right over here, the spear. Now, the rattle spear is really a weird one. I don't know if they sneakily patched this or if I just didn't notice, but originally what I thought of this artifact is that it was bad because it would lay out this big fat template on the screen, and then you're stuck controlling the targeting over the next 6 seconds of where the rattle spear is going to go. But subsequently, I've sort of figured out that you can, on PC, hit escape, and it'll sort of keep the same targeting template direction for your march, and you can use your marches as you go. So originally, I thought it was fully unusable because in order to get your 3 special attacks, you had to leave it open for 6 seconds, which, like, I'm managing 5 marches. I can't, like, the combat is, you get wrecked in 6 seconds. Like, it was disgusting. It was so bad. But now that you can actually escape out of it and it'll just keep shooting in that same direction, I actually really like the rattle spear. Plus, it's got a passive benefit, making it so that when your legion inflicts a defense break on the enemy, you get defense penetration, ignoring some of the enemy's defense. I love these sorts of passive effects. And because it's one of those 7.5% artifacts instead of a 5% artifact, I think it is really good. The other thing that I think could be really good is the gold crest. This is new. It was just teased. It's not even in the game yet. It is a Freygar artifact specifically. And I know I said I wouldn't do 2 artifacts for each sort of troop type, but I feel like it might belong up there because it's got a crazy passive ability as well, increasing the damage you deal when you have Freygar on the march, and also is going to immobilize the target. So I think that is also really powerful. Generally speaking, though, here's the thing. Immobilizing the target's pretty cool. It all depends on what this passive effect actually does. If it just boosts the artifact damage, I actually am going to bump this down to an A. And I know that might seem really crazy, but one-trick pony effects are good, but not amazing. Things that are like passively benefiting you, even in the minute and a half that you're on cooldown, plus the time it takes to get your rage back on your artifact, those are the freaking jam, man. Those are so good. Especially for marksmen who are going to sit there in the back line shooting for minutes on end, before the marksmen ultimately get taken down or targeted. I think for them especially, having that passive ability, and the mages, that passive ability is just so crucial. The other artifact that we got to talk about that I'm going to drop into an A category is this guy right over here. This artifact silences the enemy from using their activations on artifacts, which is really an interesting one. So this is called the Viola's Bow. And it fires in a rectangle, doing a bunch of skill damage, which is great. And damaged targets cannot cast artifact skills for 10 seconds. That is freaking cool, okay? And I think it's going to be really cool in the 30 versus 30 game mode. That could be meta. But for your typical open field fighting, I think it's just A category. And I don't think it's actually better. And on the topic of A category, but not actually better, I think I'm going to drop the Shadow Blades up in that category as well. Really great artifact, really big damage. Love to see it. You could make an argument that it's like kind of just like worse Viola's Bow, but both of those are listed as sort of like tier 1, like 5%er artifacts rather than 7.5%er artifacts, even though we still haven't gotten a Viola's Bow, and I'm in season 1+, bro. I don't know what's going on. This leaves us actually very little. I mean, we've sort of got a special artifact picked out for each troop type almost. The one sort of special exception that I suppose we can address now, and I think it does actually go in the S tier, is Thea's Visage of the Sanctus. Dude, this thing is cool, and it's good, and it's already, like, not even working yet, so it's going to be even better. So what does Visage of the Sanctus do? It puts 3 shields onto a target of your choosing. And every time Thea deploys a shield, she will, once they patch this thing to work correctly, get a bunch of attack from her 4th skill. Also, every time she dishes out a shield, she will do more skill damage on her active skill. So this thing is really cool. It's designed solely for Thea. I actually don't think Thea is one of the best heroes in the game, at least at this moment in time. I feel like there's not necessarily great pairings for her, but the artifact itself has an extremely high power level, and we need to reflect that here. It gives Thea the ability to, once again, shield someone who's getting hurt, and also crank more damage That's amazing. Love to see it. The final troop type we need to cover here is infantry. And there's so many good options here. Honestly, I like really love these artifacts. So this one here, the dragon artifact, does amazing single target damage. The thing is that like single target damage isn't really the jam, although it is fun to shred an individual march. And for cheeseburgering, popping out of a city using the artifact and then popping back in, that is disgusting how much damage you can do. I think I gotta give it the B though, because like there's actually kind of better stuff. And you know, let's talk about better stuff. Here's some area of effect damage. Okay, what are these? The Springs of Silence. You hit a couple targets in a little wedge in front of you. I think they're cool, but I just don't think they make the cut for infantry, neither of these, because infantry are really just designed to soak damage up, not deal damage. So those artifacts, I get that, you know, hey, look, those do damage, and the other ones in the A tier do damage, but they're not doing what you want your infantry to do, which is just to soak up just a ton of damage. Okay, so what does soak up a ton of damage? Well, the Fang of Ashkari is close. It gives you defense and defense for your 2 stat types, which is good. And also it does a nice area of effect damage on the ground. That thing's pretty cool. I'm tempted to give that an A, because that's like actually a cool effect, but I'm going to bump it down to a B. And it feels weird because I do think it's kind of a cut above these other ones, but the thing is that the damage from the Fang of Ashkari is very slow. It takes place over 8 seconds. Bro, that's a freaking eternity, and it's not actually that much damage. I'll make it the very best B artifact, and I'll make this the very worst B artifact, but I don't think it's an A. What I do think is an A is right over here, man. What the heck? Is this called Greymar's Warhammer, I think? Which, like, stuns 4 targets and does big damage. Greymar's Warhammer, man. Unfortunately, this is a 5%er artifact, and look, we have 7.5%er artifacts already, and like, we still have never gotten access to Greymar's Warhammer, no ability to unlock it yet. I think that this artifact is really cool, and probably really fun, but also a bit of a one-trick pony. Like, I think it could be good in the 30 versus 30 game mode. That could be really interesting. I think it's really good in small skirmishes, but wars are won in the big battles, not the small skirmishes, in my opinion. Where huge amounts of battlefield position are won and lost. So I'm inclined to give the Greymar's Warhammer an A rather than the S. And of course, the S goes to the Dragon Scale Armor, which is actually just disgusting. So what does that do? So the Dragon Scale Armor gives you a shield, and it gives you health. Health is the highest stat for infantry, so a percent-based boost on that is really good. That's like the best you can do. The shield is exactly on plan for your infantry, and it gives nearby units some attack. And a lot of the times, that did nothing for me. My infantry were alone. They were charging in on the front, and they were the ones taking the heat, okay? And that's okay that effect doesn't always work, because you know what's insane? Every time you use a shield, you reduce your damage taken from ranged by like 17% when you have this thing maxed. That is disgusting. This thing is exactly on plan for what infantry are supposed to be. It's actually 18% damage, ranged resistance, reducing your range damage taken by 18% for 5 seconds. That is disgusting. Now, I feel like which you would actually want here really depends on the situation, okay? When we get into this new 30 versus 30 game mode that hasn't come out yet, I have a feeling that for the big brawl where you're fighting for, presumably there's a center thing you got to go capture, then I think you want the Dragon Scale Armor. But when you're off to the side using infantry in small fights, I actually think the Greymar's Warhammer is a better choice. You go in, you stun the enemy, and you take advantage of a position penalty that they hit because they can't go anywhere to have your cavalry sweep in and do something cool. For small fights, I think some of these artifacts really are elevated. But the fights that determine whether or not your alliance wins or loses, I think is best defined by all those S tier artifacts. The only one that's like, hey, the artifact is good, but right now I'm really lukewarm on the hero, it is right over here for Thea. Okay. This guy, I'm pretty lukewarm on this. And I'm just lukewarm on Thea because, you know, every time I find myself, you know, pairing her with, Marksman or mages. I'm like, bro, I need damage right now, not shields. Like, I don't want my mages to be tanky, which is what shields are doing. I want to deal damage. So I think if you put her in like a frontline unit, like, I don't know if there's a way to make like Garwood Thea super tanky, right? Like, that's where this starts to be like really interesting in that configuration, perhaps. And if I pull up the Visage of the Sanctus, there is like one other thing about it that's like a little bit weird that, again, I'm just like really lukewarm on it, which is that it gives flying unit defense, bro, and Legion attack. So it has to be a flying unit. Oh, Visage of the Sanctus. Oh, God, it's like Celestial exclusive, man. Man, I am like tempted to bump this down. I'm like really tempted to just make it like best of A, honestly. I'm going to make it best of A. There it is. This is the Chisgule Gaming tier list, okay? Could this change based on the release of heroes into the game? Abso-freaking-lutely, man. Could this change based on our, getting our hands on the Gold Crest and trying it out? Abso-freaking-lutely, man. And what I want to bump up to the very front over here is the Kingslayer. I think the Breath of Gargantus is another one I got to bring to the front. And that list is looking pretty good. Of course, if at any moment in time you're like, hey, Chisgule, how do I see all these artifacts to like see what they do? I've got great news for you. Let me jump in game and show you. So the way that you can see every single artifact in the game is you click an equipped artifact, you hit replace, and then you can just scroll down to the ones you've not actually unlocked, and boom, you can see all these guys. So you can see that's the Breath of Gargantus I was talking about over here. I unfortunately can't see what the maximum effect is on this bad boy, which is really a bummer. If I hover over some of this, no, it's not giving it to me. So some of these we'll have to wait and see. And my big question mark on some of these artifacts is like, bro, if we're getting these so late in the show, like, why am I going to invest in a 5%er artifact? And that's the thing that I'm really kind of struggling with is, look, if I'm only going to use 5 hero pairs, that means every season I really just need 5 artifacts that determine if I'm winning or losing the season, right? And if that's the case, that there's 5 artifacts that determine if I win or lose the season, I mean, that makes the overwhelming majority of the artifacts that you get a hold of actually not something you invest in, which is a little bit weird. And I'll leave you one pro tip at the end of the video. And if you made it this far, do me the honor of throwing a like on the video. You're like 30 minutes into a Chisgule Gaming video. I appreciate you. And consider subscribing to the channel. But which ones you take to 5 stars and 6 stars first really matters a lot. Remember that 5 stars gives you a tankiness effect, 7.5% damage taken in the best case where you have the maximum number of skills. So that's best served on, obviously, your tank, which is going to be your infantry if you're running infantry. When we talk about, the damage dealt boost, although this is the first artifact I took to 5 stars, it's the last artifact I probably take to 6 stars. The first artifact I take to 6 stars is going to be right over, where are you, Velen? Oh my God. It's probably going to be the Infernal Flame. Because, who does the most damage? Hey, my Lilia Velen, baby. That thing is wrecking. That's doing the most damage for me. So I want damage dealt highest there, right? Marksman probably come next for damage dealt. Maybe it's Cavalry. Maybe it is Cavalry, right? So we'll see. If you enjoyed the vid, do me the honor again of throwing a like on the video. And if you're looking for an overall tier list of heroes, best combinations, card for both of those will be in the end screen in just a second.